Hello, everyone. This is Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and we're here for another episode of live stream with Janice Fiamengo. Just to make sure we got everything in order, I do have my patriarchal cigar in case we need to explode some feminist heads. I have my patriarchal scotch, and of course, the all-important patriarchal hat. And we have a special guest with us today. First time we're interviewing somebody on the live streams, and it's Anthony Dream Johnson, who is the organizer of a controversial conference going down in Florida later this year called Make Women Great Again. Without further ado, I'm going to bring them all in. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Howdy, howdy.
Hey there.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey.
And just to kick things off here, I do have a graphic showing your I do hear something there, your convention. So let me see if I can pop that up on the screen.
Nice.
Is this the right convention?
That is the correct one, the 22 convention, first one ever.
Cool. So to start things off, Anthony, why don't you give us a quick thumbnail of why, how, what inspired you to go down to create this conference and get it going?
Yeah, so we've been doing conferences for men since 2006, 2007. The first one was held in 2007, and that was actually the under 21 convention for young men in Orlando, Florida, where I am now, actually. I was in college at the time, and I was 17. I just found the pickup artist community a few months before, about almost a year before at that point. And I grew up and I was not good with women, and I didn't like that. In high school, middle school, things like that. And the pickup artist community I saw as a method to change that. I could, find these ideas, I could apply them to my life. And if they were true, if they held, real weight to reality, they would make my life a little better. They'd make my interactions with women better. And then at 17 years old, I had the idea. I was like, well, this is a kind of a slow progress for me. What if I got together with other young men who were better than me, who were further ahead in life than me in this part of life, and learn from them, and we could learn from each other. So my first idea for a conference actually wasn't really so much a conference as it was a meetup group, very much like you'd see with meetup.com today. Anyway, flash forward, 13 years now, or fast forward, and I've been doing that conference the entire time. We've held 18, 21 conventions at this point. And a couple years in, I turned 21 years old. So I had to stop calling it the under 21 convention at that point. And that's when it became for all men rather than just young men. And we also do a fatherhood event we started last year in 2019 called the 21 Convention Patriarch Edition. It sounds like you're a big fan of patriarchy, given your patriarchal cigar and scotch. So you fit right in. But the 22 convention has actually been, I bought the domain. I had the idea back in 2015. So, almost 5 years ago at this point. And basically women had asked, rarely, but they would ask, like, why don't you do a conference for women? Are you ever going to do a conference for women? And at that point, I didn't have too much interest in that other than occasionally it would come up as an issue. And I was like, yeah, of course, maybe someday we'll do one. I don't know when, probably not next year or even the year after that, maybe in the 2020s like we are now. So for me, the evolution of the brand wouldn't be using 21 convention, which is so heavily associated with men. It would be trying to spin that off into something similar, which would be 22 convention in this case. I also like how it matches up with XXXY, obviously the chromosomes. So
okay, yeah. Something idea, yeah.
My philosophic issue, though, back even in 2015 and 2016 and stuff, is that I was not a woman. So then and now, I have no idea what it's like to be a woman firsthand. I have observations from other men and women, in terms of communicating with me, what I could read in books and stuff like that. But the 21 convention fundamentally is for men and by men. So we're not ever able to do that for women from the perspective of being female. And philosophically, that's kind of a big issue for me and a big gap. Like, how do we bridge that gap? Like Janice talks about the empathy gap. This to me would be like almost like that too. It's like, how do I do that? How can we teach women to be better women if we're not women? So at the end of the day, Make Women Great Again was the philosophic root that I was missing at that time. It was that thing, like, in the back of my head, I was like, I want to do this someday. People keep asking me for it every few years. I'll get into that question in a second here. But anyway, the philosophic thrust I was missing was Make Women Great Again, which I saw on a hat as like a joke hat on Facebook a couple years ago, back in, late 2018. And I fell in love with it right away. I was so excited. I was up all night bitching and complaining, so to speak, to my employees and stuff. And I was obsessed with this hat and the idea. It wasn't even just the hat, it was the idea. Because I'd never seen it before. I found out later Stefan Molling, who had done a video with that title, but it wasn't quite the same philosophical thrust. It was more like politics-based and voting and things like that. It wasn't kind of the grand vision of like actually taking it seriously and literally at face value, make women great again. Not a pun, not a joke, like it's actually a real thing, as outrageous as it might seem to people who don't agree with it. So 22 Convention is a conference for women based on self-improvement, and Make Women Great Again is the gap that we're using for men to speak to women about how to be better women. From our perspective as men, what we can share, what we can observe and criticize with feminism and things like that.
Yeah. Well,
So-
yeah, just before we get into that, Anthony, I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know about any of your 21 conventions, but that's no slur on you. I'm, really, I'm out of it generally. I just barely keep up with my sort of very narrow domain of interests. But could you tell us a little bit about what sort of speakers, what sort of topics, what would be some of the titles of the talks? What were the, central themes? I'm really interested.
Yeah. I heard you earlier on this show with Steve, and I think Paul, you mentioned that at an early glance, you thought our convention was about entrepreneurship, and that's like mildly true. That's like one topic that we focused on, but it's not by any means the actual extent of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
The topics and the speakers are extremely diverse, and not in a woke leftist feminist sense like diversity. Legitimately, genuinely diverse I actually call the event the 21 Convention, as you might see in the banner in the back if you can read it. It's a panorama event for life on Earth as a man. And I actually took that from the back cover of Atlas Shrugged, which had a very similar idea for objectivism as a philosophy for life on Earth as a man. And I saw the convention itself, 21 Convention, as a very panoramic, wide-angle view of life as a man, all the issues that will face men and even fathers now throughout their life. So that can just be something simple like self-confidence, or it can be something more specific like fatherhood, or it could be marriage and relationships and dating, or health and fitness, or entrepreneurship, even self-defense. So we've had clinical psychologists speak at the convention, and we've had over half a dozen PhDs, including an astrophysicist who taught at Harvard before Harvard went all woke, crazy. FBI agents like Joe Navarro, ex-Navy SEALs, professional architects, civil architects, marriage and family therapists, as well as a litany of expert pickup artists and dating coaches and all kinds of things. And so the actual diversity of the speakers is really, really impressive to the point that it's shocking to people. Like when I invited Paul Elam to speak back in 2013 that he mentioned, I think he was very put off by the pickup artists, and he was confused as to why I would even invite him to the conference. For me, he was just a speaker on men's rights and men's issues. And fundamentally, to me, that wasn't too much different from pickup artists teaching young men how to improve social skills and confidence with meeting women and approaching women. He might have some criticism of that, Paul, which I didn't care though. I wasn't inviting him to criticize the pickup artist or fight with them or debate. I care about men's issues fundamentally, whether it's, you're super socially awkward and you can't talk to the opposite sex, or you've had a series of failed relationships or toxic relationships with women with personality disorders, or men's rights and fathers' rights, which are under attack too. And actually, the pickup artist community is what led me to the men's rights community back in like 2011 through the Spearhead. I was interviewed by the founder, I think Bill Price was his name. And that was my first real engagement with the men's rights community back then. But fundamentally, the convention has always been for men, and eventually not fathers too, and young men. And I see all issues for men are relevant to me. They're all important. It doesn't mean they're all equally important, every given context or argument. But fundamentally, men are important to me, and masculinity and these things, and the convention and all that. There is kind of limits, like we don't. The convention mostly focuses around like dating, relationships, health and fitness, and then things like self-defense, entrepreneurship, and now feminism, things like that, fatherhood. So it's not just like we're not doing like workshops on like how to use a hammer and like nails at your house, and like this isn't like a TV show like Tim Allen thing or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So Anthony, the title "Make Women Great Again." Okay, obviously we know where that's inspired from. How are women not great now?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, some women already are, of course. Janice, for example, is a very wonderful example of a woman. Dead serious. She's extremely intelligent and smart, and has completely retained her femininity in a way that most women today in America and the West have not. And that is very sad to me and very unfortunate. At the same time, I figured Piers Morgan in the interview would ask me, like, are any women great? And he didn't, but I thought he might. I kind of anticipated that. And I was ready to say that in Poland, I think women are very great at a cultural, social scale that is not seen in America right now. At least that was my experience spending a month there last year in the capital of Warsaw, Poland, and Krakow, Poland.
Now,
So it's
Poland,
not like
Poland is a traditional conservative kind of culture even today, right?
yeah, yeah, and they're
So are
very
your
patriotic too.
right? So is your movement, your ideas, your convention, would you say this is a traditional conservative sort of movement or convention?
Excellent question, and the answer is no. But I'm not opposed to that, and I find a lot of merit in traditional gender roles and things that came before my time, before my generation. So to put this into context, Make Women Great Again is not the same thing as Make Women Traditional Again. And there are now some like trad wife movements and stuff like that. I think that's why actually Piers Morgan and the UK, they're interested in Make Women Great Again. Because like there's this trad wife thing that's this whole meme in the UK right now going on.
But
And
they
so
were
they see
really
that.
antagonistic to you.
Oh, totally. Yeah, they don't like it, but it's going on, and they're curious about it for clickbait reasons and ad revenue and stuff like that. It's controversy, and they knew that bringing us on the show it would fit into that narrative for them.
Right. Yeah, the trad wife thing. There was just recently an article in the British Daily Mirror, I think, which I had to join. I had to subscribe in order to be able to read the article, and I never did get to read the article, so I've only read the first paragraph. But it basically compares the trad wife movement to ISIS brides.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pretty opposed, I'd say, the mainstream. Yeah. So how would you distinguish then a kind of the traditionalist thrust of some contemporary discourse and movements and your convention?
Yeah. So like I was saying, Make Women Great Again is not literally the same thing just in writing, in words, as Make Women Great Again to Make Women Traditional Again.
Right.
So what I mean by that is that I think if we wound the clocks back 50 years, to the 1950s or 60s or whatever, I don't see how we wouldn't end up in the exact same place we are now with this unraveling shit show of a culture with feminism and wokeness and PC and all this Orwellian stuff we have. So as I see it, there's a lot of merit to the way things were and gender roles and gender relations, but they weren't perfect to the point that they were able to be infiltrated and they had weak points that ultimately led them to falling apart. I think it's not a controversial idea to say right now that family values and traditional values are falling apart at the seams today in the West. So I don't see them as perfect. And I think the future, let me say this, the future is built on a backbone of traditional values, but that's not the entirety of it. I think we have to make something more positive and better. And I think that's also why traditional conservatives fail in politics. They're always trying to conserve something rather than build something better for the future. So Make Women Great Again, for example, is not, like I said, this, winding of the clocks back 50 years. It's this positive new movement that I want to use to replace feminism completely. I want to abolish feminism, like Piers Morgan said about us, an abolitionist, and replace it with something better and more positive. And that is more, in addition to that, more secular too. So I think a lot of, for example, traditional gender roles are based strictly or very hardcore on like religions and faiths. And to me, that means that in a secular context and a wider conversation in public, you lose a lot of that argument the minute someone doesn't agree with you in your religion. Mm-hmm. If your argument for traditional gender roles traces back to your God or your faith, at the end of the day, if they don't agree with you on major philosophic issues like that, then your argument's not going to win. They're just they'll find a way to dismiss it because you're asking for too much. You're asking them to embrace your epistemology, your faith, and their God, their metaphysics. So there's a lot of major philosophic components that traditional gender roles, I think, were built on. And in a wider competing culture of competing ideas and philosophies, it's not going to work. Like I want to use Make Women Great Again to promote an American femininity and an American masculinity, like we're doing with the 21 Convention, which is not a religious movement.
What does that look like? It's not, you're saying it's not winding the clock back to the 1950s, and you want to abolish feminism, which, by the way, is probably the most powerful, influential movement in the West, around the world, possibly, as a single movement. But what does the future woman look like? How is it distinguished from the traditional and from the feminist?
Yeah. So I think women need to embrace being feminine, first of all, and they need to choose to do so on their own. They don't need to be yelled at or derided to do it or anything like that. They need to choose that. And so the other part of it was, what was the other part of your question?
Just how that is distinguished from the traditional, like the femininity was a traditional value in the 50s, that beauty and sensitivity, compassion, family, all those things. And obviously feminism has declared itself to be anti-family. So you're going to get rid of feminism, and you don't want to go back to traditional cons. So how does your view of the future of feminine nature, female nature, what does that look like?
Well, I'll give a specific example that I talked about in an interview with Piers Morgan about motherhood first. So I think, for example, women should pursue career opportunities and education and things like that, but they should do so much later in life. For most women, not all of them, most of them. So for example, I think with women peaking in their fertility at like 21, 22 years old, that means that most of them should prioritize, and they should be encouraged to prioritize motherhood first and family formation. And then later in their 30s and 40s, they should go ahead and pursue, if they want, and I think a lot of them will, advanced education, whatever they want to do, build a business, pursue a life like that, pursue a career. But they're not told to do that now. They have this kind of mixed and matched mishmash of stuff that they do, where they pursue higher education immediately out of high school. They leave the home. They get banged out on Tinder. They go to college and get into all this student loan debt that they can't get rid of, pursuing often very worthless degrees, only to then maybe do something productive with it and then flip it all on its head and cancel it at 30 when they hit the wall and they're freaking out. And now they all of a sudden want to get married, lock down, get a husband, build a family. And then they're supposed to return to that, either do that at the same time and then return to that in their 40s. And I think this is ridiculous. So that's just one example, I think. And I don't think women were encouraged too much. I think the feminist narrative that they were forbidden to do this is kind of rewriting history. But I do think that women should be able to pursue these things, and they probably should, just not in the order they're told to now. The order that they're told to now, they need to flip it on its head. Motherhood and family and marriage need to come first, and then higher education and career needs to come much later in life, particularly with relevance to their window of fertility that they have to pursue.
Yeah, a lot of women have regretted putting off motherhood until it was too late. So in that sense, you're really raising a red flag for women rather than telling them what to do. You just want to point out that that you could regret that decision. Yeah,
and they probably not only could they, but they probably will. And I think it's hard for young women to understand that there are permanent consequences to delaying motherhood and family formation. Stefan Molyneux is notorious for talking about the eggs dying off. 90% of them are dead by 30. But there's more to it than it's not just eggs dying off. It's that the chance of a problem in pregnancy, a problem in childbirth, birth defects, the rate of that goes up. Officially still in medicine, they don't like calling it that now. But you have it past 35, any pregnancy you have is geriatric. It's advanced maternity age. And the rate of birth defects and Down syndrome and all these things, they tend to go way, way up at that age. And a lot of women too, like I haven't, this one is not quite as hard science on it, but a lot of older women that hear about these women having children in their late 30s and 40s, older women in their 60s and 70s are kind of appalled by that, just by the fact that having a young child in your 40s, like say you have a 3-year-old 41 years old, that's really not just time intensive, but it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to chase a 2-year-old around your house when you're 22 rather than 42.
Mm-hmm. I was 41 with a 2-year-old, 3-year-old.
Yeah.
I was.
And that's an issue for men too, no doubt. The issue for you though is that you have a much wider fertility window and window of reproduction that is not anywhere near. One of my good friends, one of our speakers, an architect, he had his first child at 48 years old, which is really late. But he was able to do that, and the child's healthy and everything's fine. A woman having a child at that age is almost impossible. And if you were to do it, the chance of a birth defect is very, very high. Mm-hmm. So that comes back to men and women are, in the manosphere we say men and women are different, and I believe that totally, that we're fundamentally vastly different, even with consideration to the ways that we're similar, that obviously we're both human. So feminism, I think, has been trying to erase that, and that's part of the future too, is that gets back to being culturally normal, that it's okay for men and women to be different, it's okay for those differences to be celebrated, not ignored or neutralized or stigmatized and stuff like that. Men and women are different, and that's fun.
So far, you're sounding like a fairly conventional anti-feminist. Counteracting the feminist claims that you can do things like put off your childbearing years forever. There's no consequences.
Yep.
Feminist claims that men and women are basically the same.
Yeah.
Things like this. Janice, do you have any question along those lines?
Well, I wanted to ask also if you could maybe describe the ideal person who might be interested in your conference, and maybe even you could tell us a little bit about the women that you're in touch with who are planning to attend or who have expressed interest. What tends to be the age, background, interest? What kind of things do they say about what they're hoping to get out of the conference? That kind of thing. Anything you could tell us would be interesting.
Yeah, so you're focused mostly on the 22 convention there, right?
Yeah, the 22 convention. Yeah.
So most of the women I've talked to, I haven't talked to all the attendees yet, but they seem to be in the 30s, which is kind of what I figure. 30s and 40s. Some of them are wives of the men attending the 21 convention at the same time.
Right.
Some of them are not. They're just single women in their 30s that have an interest in going to the conference and have the financial means to do so. I kind of figured that we wouldn't have a lot of 20-somethings, and I continue to hold that opinion that we're not going to have many 20-somethings attend the conference, if any.
Why would you say that? Why do you think?
Well, even the best price right now you can get on the conference if you bring a friend is $500. But on top of that, you have to buy, they're probably not going to live in Florida. So you have to buy a flight, hotel, take time off of work and school or whatever they're doing. And then on top of that, still pay for the ticket, which if they really, finagled it right, is $500. So that's just a financial roadblock that a lot of young women are just not going to spend. They will spend, plenty of money doing other things. Unfortunately, today, they'll buy Louis Vuitton handbags for God knows what. But investing that much in a conference is just, it's unusual for them. There are some conferences out there for women, like one of our speakers back in the day, Matthew Hussey. He's a big speaker to women. He does self-improvement for women, different from how we're doing it, obviously. But he has millions of followers on YouTube, for example. His conferences and his business model, though, is a lot different than ours. So they host conferences for women, and they're like one day, and they're like really inexpensive, like $30, $40 or something like that. The issue is on the back end, this is very common for conferences, is that they upsell to this huge retreat or workshop. So he has this conference for women, they pay $40 to attend, 500 of them show up, and then they offer a retreat in Florida, nearby actually in Kissimmee, Florida, about 40 minutes from me. And that's like $10,000 for some weekend retreat, kind of like a Tony Robbins style thing. Which we don't do. The conference is very intellectual and it's very like action-based. Like one of the reasons we think it's possible they do is because we do a lot of.
We're losing your audio, I think, somehow. Are you hearing him okay, Janice?
No, it just started to dim.
Test.
Okay,
That's
here we
better.
Go. Here we go.
That's better, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so one of the reasons the tickets to our conferences cost what they do is because we spend a lot of money on filming. I hire professional video and photography teams because I care a lot about that for many reasons. One of which is that years down the road, no one's even going to remember who attended the conference and what it was like very much unless you record it. And recording it is where I think the not just the positivity, but the positive impact is at. Because you can watch these videos for years and years and years. We have conferences, for example, from 2011 and 2012 and stuff like that are viewed thousands of times a day on YouTube and things like that. So we spend a lot of money on that, and a lot of people don't. They'll host a conference and they won't film it, or they'll use like very cheap filming. They'll film it on phones and stuff like that, or very inexpensive equipment. We use professional teams with professional gear, TV studio stuff, and then we put that out free to the world to make an impact and actually make change. Last year alone, we reached about 10 million men with our videos. And this year, we hope to reach even more than that. And now women, too. A lot of that will be through outrage and a lot of anger and stuff like that off the bat. But I don't care. As long as they watch it and they're curious about it, that's what matters to me. Long term, I think that we'll just overwhelm them with so much media that will eventually kind of break through just by repetition alone.
Does that get at your question, Janice? Do you want to follow up to that?
Well, tell us some of the topics that will be presented at the 22 convention.
Yeah, so one of them is by Noah Ravoy. He's been huge on this. He talks a lot about female agency, or agency in general for men and women. So taking responsibility, and I mean his whole talk's going to be literally, I think, on taking female agency for women.
What was his name again?
Noah Ravoy. Yeah.
I'm just going to write that in the comments here. Noah, how do you spell his last name?
Revoy. He spoke for us last year in Poland for the first time at our Polish convention. Other topics will be, my topic's going to be motherhood first. And I'm going to do an entire presentation on that elaborates on what I was talking about earlier in the show here. that women, like America first, is a political saying. So it's building off that. It's a play off that, right? Like a meme.
Right.
But I really believe in motherhood first for most women. That's to me what makes sense. Like if I was a young woman, that's what I would want to do. Knowing what I do as a young man today, that makes common sense and it makes biological sense. Unless you're going to take the high risk route of, that's what that is. It's like when women delay these things by 10, 15 years, there's all kinds of problems for them in the end of the day. Like we talked about with biology and the eggs and birth defects and things like that. So, and they're lied to about this. They're told to just kind of put that off and ignore it. It's not a big deal. You can have it all, be whatever you want. You go, girl power, all this crap. I'm going to kind of collect all the lies and the memes that women are told and then illustrate this out in a PowerPoint and presentation and advocate for motherhood first. And then most women are going to be a lot happier. And it's a more rational decision, is my view of it. Unless you have the ability to be a Janice Fiamengo or an Ayn Rand and you want to live that life.
Your audio is going all weird again. I don't know what's up with that. It just kind of goes all like really muffledy. But I'm going to say, just while you look at that, I have 3 good friends from university. All 3 of them put off motherhood, and all 3 of them were unable to. Well, one in particular tried to even do in vitro fertilization, and that failed in 2 occasions. 2 of them adopted from outside of the country, and the other never did have children. But there was I have to concur that, in my experience, the 3 close friends, female friends I had from university who did put off motherhood, all 3 of them, it was very distressful for them.
Yeah. How's my audio now? Any different?
It's worse now.
The volume's gone way down.
The volume's way down.
How about now?
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about now?
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Sounds better. Okay. Yeah.
Keep me posted. Sorry about
There's
that.
one thing you might check if you get it, if we have this problem again, is that there's a setting to turn off the automatic audio processing in StreamYard.
Oh yeah.
If you go into the audio settings and click it off, it might be StreamYard that's kind of, mucking up your audio.
Yeah. I just turned it off, so let's see what that is.
Well,
Okay.
now
And
you're
now
low
turn it
again.
up a bit. Turn the volume up a bit on your input device there.
That's about all I can get.
That's good. That's
Okay,
better.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think if you stay close to the mic, you'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Other topics at the conference will be, some of them will just be health and fitness based. For young women, I believe firmly in a paleo diet or a paleo-ish diet. So looking at our evolutionary history as men and women as a species and doing your best to respect that and to align yourself with that. I've had a lot of success with that throughout my life, and so has my sister. One of my sisters, anyway, my older one, was for years, she would watch me eat this diet, and she was just baffled that I would eat this way. And finally, when I moved back to Orlando 4 years ago, she decided to listen to me and just take my advice with it and just kind of roll with it. And she immediately lost 40 pounds in 3 months. Her friends were shocked. They thought she was lying about how she was doing it. She didn't work out a single time, which I did not tell her to do. She just didn't do it. So for her to lose all this weight and now keep it off for years and years and years has been really, really amazing for her. It also helped her cure, permanently cure now, it seems. I think it's called PCOS, polycystic or something like that. Anyway, it's a pretty serious condition. It's a pretty serious condition. It's like PCOS, and it's a pretty serious condition for women that can affect their fertility and very negatively, and other kind of cancer issues and things like that. So that'll be just part of it, just health and fitness, and women,
Cool.
Being lean and healthy. Like when I was in Poland, men and women both, but particularly with women, you didn't see overweight women like anywhere. I saw, I think, one the entire time I was in Poland, and I'm pretty sure she was a tourist in Krakow. And I think it's good for men and women to be healthy and to pursue health. And today, that's for women, that's being negated with body positivity and all this stuff. Whether it's a very negative development for health and for beauty.
Definitely.
Being sick and obese is not beautiful. It's not attractive.
It's not empowering.
It's not empowering. Now, some guys might. I mean, look, some people like things like some guys like fat women and stuff, and that's fine. But I think
it's not healthy. It's just not healthy. Whether you
Objectively,
like
it's not
it
healthy.
beautifully as an aesthetic or not doesn't change the fact that it's physically quite unhealthy.
Exactly. And it's bad. I mean, it's bad for your life. It's bad for you. It's bad for your children. It's not good for anyone.
So your conference has nothing out of bounds, basically. It's focused on doing counteracting some of the negative cultural narratives that are coming from feminism, but also including anything else that you think of that could be related to improving a woman's life.
Yeah. Yeah, right? they'll get marriage and dating advice and things like that too. Relationship advice, very much like the men do.
I want to make just a quick shout out to the viewers here that I am going to post a few comments fairly shortly. We're in 30 minutes here already, and Janice, how is your time looking?
Oh, feel fine. Yeah, sure.
Fine.
Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep an eye on shortly. Let's have a couple of. What I'd like to do, if you're okay with this, is I'd like to give Anthony a chance to comment on some of his more outrageous tweets that I've come across. Some that probably drew fire and criticism for you personally and your movement. So if I can flash a few of those up here in a second. And then after that, I'll try to get to some of the questions in the chat here.
Yeah, I saw one earlier you posted. Happy to do this.
Yeah, I've got a few put to the side here. So folks, give us about 10 minutes before we start to look at your questions and start to think about your questions as we just get through this next section. Janice, I'm going to look for some of his tweets. If you want to ask Anthony a question while I find an appropriate tweet to pop up.
I'm really curious, Anthony, as I think I mentioned to you just earlier today, I wonder if you could say a few things about your experience as a boy and a young man. You did already mention that you were uncomfortable interacting with women, so that was one of the things you wanted to talk with guys about, techniques for being with women. But what was your experience more generally as a young man growing up in a post-feminist or feminist culture? Because you're quite a bit younger than Steve and I are. We're the generation that kind of came of age in the early 1970s. Feminism did exist then, but it wasn't the dominant ideology of the culture. You came of age much later than that, when feminism was the dominant ideology. Could you talk about that a little bit? What that was like for you? And obviously you're not a feminist man. So at a pretty young age, you decided, I'm not going to toe this line. This doesn't work for me. Could you say a bit about that?
Yeah. So I don't know too much about childhood. I haven't thought too much about that. I mean, I grew up a lot in the 90s. I was born in 1988. So in the 90s, I feel like feminism wasn't quite, had not quite infiltrated the school system to the extent it does today. Like from what I hear today about children in schools really horrifies me.
Yeah.
There was some of it, looking back on it, but it wasn't the ridiculously, outraged stuff we see today. I didn't have any drag queen story time, for example, growing up. I felt I was treated pretty fairly as a young boy, first grade, fifth grade, stuff like that. But today I hear stories and I see things in the news that are not like that. And, none of my classmates are transitioning to girls. Their mothers were not taking them to the doctor to get hormone blockers and all kinds of weird stuff. So I grew up in a little bit even without the internet when I was young. We didn't get our first computer until 1998. So as young as I am, I'm not that young. But more of my experience I can speak to was going out to bars and clubs and learning how to communicate with women, interact. Having grown up, I did grow up in I don't know what you call it, like a blue pill kind of Disney childhood. So I believed a lot of the stuff about how to interact with women that I was taught on TV and things like that, and it's not healthy. A lot of it teaches men to be, young boys to be not masculine, to reject their masculinity and to not embrace it. And that wasn't good. And that, I think, is central to why it was hard for me to interact with women that I liked. Young feminine women like young masculine men. And feminism, I think, is the opposite of that. Like we're seeing today more explicitly with toxic masculinity. This is kind of like proto-toxic masculinity, being taught not to embrace it, being taught to be excessively vulnerable and excessively emotional and in touch with your emotions and all this stuff.
So do you remember kind of getting those messages that you needed to be able to open up, you needed to be able to talk about your feelings, you needed to be empathic in that way, and do you explicitly remember that didn't work, that young women didn't find that attractive?
Yeah, and it was confusing. Like I could see, even before I found the manosphere and the pickup artist community and stuff, I would see guys that would act in ways, including some of my friends, that would act in ways that would fly in the face of this stuff. They were a lot more cocky. They were self-assured. They were more dismissive of women who weren't going with what they wanted to do. So they were more the kind of Chad types. So I would see that, and it was very confusing because that was not what I was taught that would be attractive to women, being excessively nice and things like this. And so I was curious, but I didn't have enough knowledge though, or I couldn't read the situation enough to do anything about it. I would just see it and I would kind of take a note of it. And it wasn't until I found the pickup artist community and things like that that I started being able to unravel a little bit of this. I will say though that in my late teens and 20s and stuff like that, going out to bars and nightclubs and things like that, that was pretty eye-opening. That was that was hookup culture, and that was that eventually led to things like Tinder and stuff.
Right.
So just seeing a lot of toxic relationships and just shenanigans out at bars and clubs. It's really getting nuts out there. Like at this point, it's just nuts. Like it's way different from a place like Poland. When I went to Poland and met women there, there was a lot more benevolence between men and women. There was a lot more clear expectations of how to be a man and what that meant. Women acted like women. They were, curious about my hat that I would wear, but they weren't combative about it. They were just wanted to ask questions about it, things like that. So, speaking of that,
this might be a good time to jump in on this particular tweet you made here.
Okay.
Let's just have at it. Everything is black and white 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
Absolutely.
So there's no gray areas in anything ever.
Correct. Never, ever, ever.
Now, I guess I would have to really disagree with that.
Sure.
But why would you say there's no black and white? Everything is a lot, okay? Everything is everything in the universe.
That's
Nothing.
Right.
It's always black and white. And it's never anything but black and white. Okay, do elaborate, please.
So that's actually a point from objectivism, a philosophical point that Ayn Rand was very consistent on throughout her whole life, and I believe it. I agree with her on that. And so I get your skepticism and your criticism of it. With there's no gray areas, there's nothing like that. So one of the ways this was put by Dr. Nathaniel Branden, also a major figure in objectivism for a long time, someone I got to meet when I was younger, is that even things that exist on in a continuum, in a spectrum, or like in a gray area, when you say that, you're saying they don't exist as a binary, as a simple yes and no. So that in itself is a black and white issue. You've made it. It is this thing. It is a gray area. It is not black and white, which is in itself, I think, philosophically still black and white. And I think if no matter how far down this rabbit hole you go, there's always a way to eventually divide it into black and white thinking like that. So it doesn't mean that though everything in the world is a binary. Things do exist on spectrums and continuums, in degrees and stuff like that, and that's fine. I just don't find a philosophic opposition to the idea that things are still black and white when people say that. And I think this is actually like a major way philosophically that people are able to sneak. I ran an objectivism called it package dealing. They would package. This is what feminism does a lot of. They package up these nice things like equality. They had this, this package of equality, and they pack all this really toxic crap into it. They sneak it into culture, into cultural memes and hashtags now and stuff. And then young women buy this stuff wholesale. They don't just pick a little bit of it. They buy the whole thing, the whole package. So that's how things get snuck in like that. But yeah, if things exist on a continuum, on a spectrum, or in a gray area, and not something else like a simple binary, that's still a black and white issue. You've just expanded it to be a little more complex.
Well, I do have something to say about that later, but I'm going to give Janice a chance to chime in here.
Oh, geez, I don't want to get into a big philosophical discussion about black and white. Okay, well,
you can start with I agree or disagree.
I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something else, and that is that I would assume that the biggest response you're getting in terms of negative, outcry is that somehow, no matter what you say about what you're trying to do at the 22 convention, this is really about misogyny. This is about men wanting to control women. This is about men telling women, how dare you, what women should be. This is about men telling women that they have to exist primarily for men rather than for themselves. And there's nothing else to this but a kind of denigration of women. How I mean, I don't think that's true, but how do you respond to that kind of criticism?
Yeah, that is like one of the main things we've gotten, obviously. Yeah, first of all, for me, it's just a bunch of nonsense. Like when I look at the page, and this, if you look at the criticisms, usually when they say this, they're not usually not citing anything specific. It's
Right.
this kind of vague, generalized, knee-jerk response to it. And to me, that means it's very mindless. It's not very thoughtful. They didn't really come to that conclusion. That's something they were taught and kind of force-fed through culture. They think that not because they thought that they came to that conclusion independently. They think that because they were told to think that by celebrities they follow in media and movies for decades of their life. They've been kind of fed this feminist narrative. So it isn't that surprising that they think that. As far as the hatred of women or misogyny, yeah, it's all a bunch of nonsense. It's built off love. Like, I don't like seeing women do bad. I'm an American, so just even in that context, I don't like seeing American women be fat and miserable and depressed and take psychiatric medications and end up single mothers and broken families and drinking, alcoholism and things like this. For example, I saw a study about a year ago that showed that American women in their 50s, alcoholism was skyrocketing. And that's just like one, micro example of what's happening to women today. So I like seeing women do well, and they're not doing well. And in many ways, feminists don't even disagree with us on that. They call it the paradox of female happiness. The decline in female happiness since the 1970s.
Yeah, I think you did a Fiamengo file on that, didn't you, Janice?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, and the number of women on antidepressants, the number of women who will outright say they're not satisfied with their lives, they're not happy with their lives, even though they have more choices, they have more economic power. Just, materially, women are actually doing much better than men are in terms of like real wages, entry into the workforce, job status. Obviously, in terms of higher education, women are massively outpacing men, but still cry, that more needs to be done for women. And yet, despite all those measurable markers of success, every survey that's done shows women expressing less life satisfaction. Well, meanwhile, guys are, often reporting that they're doing all okay, despite all the very measurable injustices that men are experiencing. So, yeah, it's hard to argue.
Definitely. I recommend you viewers look at the Fiamengo file on the state of female happiness. Do you remember the number of that by any chance, Janice?
No, I don't.
It's a very good one, though, and it's well researched and well presented. So have a look at that on that topic. We got a few more tweets to get to. I want Anthony to respond to. I just wanted to say one thing about the everything black and white thing is that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle has something to say about that, and that's all I'm going to say. If you're interested in another comment about what black and white means. But anyways, let's carry on to another tweet, which may be a little bit more controversial. Women are peak sexy when they are submissive and obedient. Where's that coming from?
Well, first of all, it reminds me of what Janice brought up a minute ago with the misogyny stuff and sexist stuff. And that's that how dare men have any opinion in public about what women should do.
Exactly.
Which they want a package deal in with being dictatorial and controlling, which I'm not. I don't think men should be that way. I don't believe in being domineering, which I view as fundamentally different from being dominant and assertive and things like that. So this, to me, this is my opinion. This is what I think as an assertive, masculine young man. This is what I like. I don't think this is a universal application to all women.
So this is a personal statement of what you're attracted to.
It's a personal one, but I also believe it's very normal for young men who are masculine, have high testosterone, who are legitimately masculine, which today would be called toxically masculine. So to me, this is just fairly normal for a cisgendered, heterosexual, young American man, and for any, Canadian man or whatever. It's okay if people think differently than me on that. I don't, unlike the feminists and things like that, I'm not a dictatorial control freak. I don't want to silence people who think differently than me. I'm not opposed to people having different opinions than me, but this is my opinion, and I think it's very sexy and women embrace this. I think it's a natural part of being feminine and being a woman. It's one major path in life that women are going to take. And yeah, I think it's wonderful. And there's nothing what do you call it, dismissive about it. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a low person. I think it's very wonderful. This is very attractive. The same way women like a strong, confident man. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's very feminine for women to want that in their life and to pursue that. And this is the inverse of that, but we're not allowed to say this today, which is one of the reasons I said it. This is totally
a bit of
off limits
an
to have
inverse,
this.
yeah. Janice, what do you think about that?
Well, I have no problem with somebody saying this, and I think it's true too. I mean, come on, every movie, even in this woke world, that shows very attractive men and women interacting, aside from the ones where they have women as superheroes. But even there, yes, I think that we see that women are attracted to a certain kind of traditionally masculine behavior in men, and vice versa for men and women. So I mean, honestly, I don't see this as particularly controversial at all.
Did you get negative feedback from this comment, Anthony?
I mean, apparently I got some laugh faces and some hearts, so it looks pretty
Yeah,
good.
You got that. Yeah, okay.
And my Facebook has a more mixed following too, so I post different content to Twitter and Facebook. Twitter, it's almost all men with a few women.
Okay.
Facebook is much more personal for me, and I've, high school people and things like that. So when I post things there, it's to kind of test and gauge what the average person is going to say in response to it. Unlike my Twitter, which is much more manosphere following and things like that. But to your point too,
go ahead.
what was I going to say with this? I lost train of thought, but I'll let you know if I remember it.
All right, I'll move on to the next tweet here because we do want to get to some of the viewer questions as well.
Sure.
So here's another tweet, and this isn't really related to Make Women Great Again, or maybe it is related in a sense. It's but is you saying racism, or you posted this? Sorry, no, this isn't your comment. This is from PragerU.
Yeah,
racism isn't the biggest issue for Black Americans. Father absences.
Yeah,
we could talk about it. It's not your it's not your quote, but if we want to, we could comment on this.
Yeah,
just make it quick so we can get to your other tweets.
Sure. So I think I found this from one of our Black speakers. He shared it, if I'm not mistaken. It was from him, and it's it's an article by PragerU about racism and the Black culture or community and things like that. I've seen this argument presented before too. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this. That single motherhood is particularly high in the Black community and things like that. So it was just compelling to me and interesting, and I shared it. I didn't read the article like word for word. I just kind of skimmed it and I found it interesting and shared it.
Yeah, it is an interesting insight, and I would tend to agree with it. You, Janice, anything to say on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard a lot of advocates, men's issues advocates, make the same point. Black men in particular. The last ICMI, one advocate there was talking about that problem in the Black community and how devastating it is, particularly for young Black men. So for sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move along then. Feminists smashed the old patriarchy, so we're building a new one in May.
Yeah.
A new patriarchy. Okay.
So as you've heard, feminists, they smashed the patriarchy. Apparently they're still smashing whatever bits of it are left. They keep smashing it. I don't know when that's going to end. They've been smashing it for 100-something years now. I actually say that I say today that when patriarchy or feminists scream about patriarchy, like today, it's delusional. They're seeing ghosts. We haven't had a patriarchy in America in decades upon decades. So when they say that today, it's really bizarre. And they think it's still an issue and that all this stuff, nonsense.
Well, I think thinkers like Warren Farrell will claim, or I think I've heard Warren argue that there never really was a patriarchy. There never was a patriarchy in the sense that feminists describe patriarchy. And I think Peterson's made the same argument, and we touch on that in The Birth of Feminism as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Janice, do you have anything to add? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, yeah, they're making like a boogeyman out of it. It's a straw man. Yeah, they make this. So I've heard that argument too, and I haven't dove into that too deep, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case too.
So what does the new patriarchy look like?
Yeah. So the new patriarchy, when I actually say that, I'm speaking more specifically to men being the leaders in their homes and their families and their relationships, which I think is very natural and very healthy for men and women who are heterosexual. So, we call the 21 Convention Patriarch Edition. I almost called it the Fatherhood Edition, and we still do sometimes, because that's really its focus. But I call it the Patriarch Edition, number one, because it triggers people and outrages them. But number two, I really do believe in, man-led relationships and father-led homes. And to me, that's, patriarchy at a micro, family scale. And that to me is a very healthy, positive thing. And I think that's what people should choose. They shouldn't be forced to adopt. This is what they should genuinely come to a conclusion as, in terms of an actual decision in their life. And so in that sense, that is the new patriarchy, where men lead their families, and there's not this co-equal kind of three hands on a steering wheel relationship for a family that tends to result, I think, in a depolarized mess that ends in divorce and broken families.
Anthony, there's this strong parallel with religious philosophy here through a lot of what you're saying. So is there a religious component or religious Christian religious inspiration to your movement?
Well, I will say that I'm very interested sometimes in religious texts like the Bible and the way they talk about masculinity and femininity and men and women, all these things. But I myself, I'm completely secular. I'm an objectivist. I was raised Catholic, and then I abandoned that when I was like 17. And I've been an objectivist now for over 10 years. So my conference is not a religious conference. None of them are. None of the speeches are, I don't think we've ever had a religious speech at the conference, as far as I know, in over 10 years and 18 events. So it's a very secular conference where all races, religions are welcome. And we have Mormons speak at the conference, Catholics, Baptists, Jews, Muslim maybe. Maybe. I know there's some Muslim attendees. So it's a super diverse, and it's diverse to the point that feminists and woke culture should be jealous of us. That we've been able to organize and amalgamize, I guess might be the word, so many different cultures and races together. It's really amazing seeing the conference. We blur all the faces out, can't really see the attendees for privacy, but the actual diversity of people at the conference and demographics and races and religions is seriously impressive. Because what binds us together is a pursuit of masculinity and femininity and positive relationships and healthy relationships and things like that, which to me comes from focusing on reality, rationality.
Yeah.
I'm an objectivist. I care about objective reality. That is my God, so to speak. And reason is my guidestone for pursuing that. And I think that, even highly religious people, they still have a high respect for reason and these things, logic and things like this. And that's why, for example, a lot of Christians do like Ayn Rand, especially her views on politics and economics.
Oh yeah, they do. Absolutely. Yeah. And, and that's the thing. I mean, it seems to me, you are attempting to forge relationships across a whole bunch of different subcultures. And I think your premise that relations between men and women now have never been lower, at a lower ebb, have never been more broken. And that what good people of good faith should want is amity, love, mutual respect, empathy, mutual support between men and women. Lots of different people can agree on that. Yeah. And it's very clear that feminism is not the way to that. And so, let's start talking about different ways that men and women can work together to achieve that. I think that's a wonderful idea. There might be disagreements about what specifically that's going to look like. And obviously it's impossible to map it because it's a work in progress. Yeah. But I think it's a wonderful idea.
Thanks. And the secular element too is really important to me because I think secular arguments are the most durable in public. And that's why even, some of our speakers are very deeply religious. They're very committed to their faith.
I can imagine.
And the fact that they associate with me as an atheist and objectivist is startling to a lot of Christians. Until they talk to me and they get to know what I'm about and that I'm very serious about advocating for these values that they support strongly, but from a secular position so that anyone can embrace them. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to defend American masculinity and I want to promote American femininity. Just for, as an American, I want to be able to see a young American, like my little nephew was born recently a few months ago, he's 4 months old now. I want to see that he can embrace, no matter what faith he's taught by my little sister and her husband, that he can embrace a masculinity growing up just based on being an American. Like, what's that like? And for young women too, regardless of what faith or creed they're taught growing up, how can they embrace being a woman and becoming a mother and pursuing family, independent of what they're taught, maybe alongside it, but otherwise independent too, alongside, what they were raised as, whatever faith.
That's terrific, Anthony. And I think if we have time for one more of these tweets, and then we should get to some questions. What do you guys think? You got anything? Can we move ahead with that?
I'm good to go.
Okay. Here's one last tweet. Healthy women hate equality in relationships, hate it even more in marriage, and despise it with a burning passion in the bedroom.
There's a little more to it too if you scroll down.
I know. I deliberately put that part out because I know darn well that will get us fully demonetized.
Oh, blue. Oh, geez.
So if you noticed in my Piers Morgan interview, I was very he kept talking about gender equality, and I don't think he listened to what I said specifically, which is that I absolutely support equality before the law for men and women, for everyone, and I mean that. And obviously today I think that men are not treated equally before the law, and we're treated like second-class citizens, and that's a big problem. And feminists don't care about that because they don't care about equality before the law. But in terms of like equality in the home and in a relationship and in the bedroom, I think it's a very bad thing. I think this, for example, I think equality is the opposite of polarity, of differences between the sexes being magnified, including when they're complementary. There should be a play and like a back and forth and good interplay like that. So I don't think it's good. I think equality in a relationship means there's no leader. It means that if you look at it as a car as an analogy, it's like three hands on the steering wheel. Someone in the passenger seat is grabbing onto it and trying to drive it as well. And I don't think that works. And I don't think women like it. I don't think it's passionate. I don't think it's romantic. I think it's a very negative and very bad thing. Like feminists, I think, are pursuing like what Ayn Rand would call the philosophy of the zero. They're trying to zero everything out. They want to zero out masculinity to nothing. They want it, or invert it. They want to zero out femininity so that women are not feminine. Like they don't even know what that means today. Like that feminist on that show, Piers Morgan, he asked her, name one good thing about masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
She had nothing to say.
She had nothing to say.
I've never heard feminists say anything good.
Yeah,
But then he went beyond that though. He said, name one positive thing about femininity. I think it was exact question, and she had nothing to say. I mean, they have erased all meaning, biological meaning for being a man and being a woman, which is just nuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she said that that was gender stereotyping.
Yeah.
Which is the typical feminist answer. I thought that was actually a fascinating moment. And although I was so frustrated with Piers Morgan for the way he treated you, I have to give him credit that, obviously that's just his MO. And he did a pretty good job because that woman, she right away said, nothing wrong with the phrase toxic masculinity because we know that there are traits that are toxic in masculinity. And she started reaming them off. I forget what she said. And then, and he allowed her to say that. And then he said, okay, what are some of the positive aspects of masculinity? She couldn't say. So that's feminism in a nutshell. Brilliant. It has everything to say about masculinity and can say nothing positive or indeed about femininity. Well, how can you have both?
I agree strongly that having those feminists in the show is actually brilliant for them for a number of reasons, to get the controversy and the combativeness going and all that. But those feminists boilerplate spit out what feminists today believe. I mean, she just like a robot. She just spit that stuff out, and she sincerely believed. I think that was very sincere. She didn't. To her, there was no difference between femininity and masculinity. The ideas don't even make sense to her.
Yeah, it's all just gender stereotyping. Everything is social. Yeah.
I want to touch on your. Sorry. Go ahead.
So on this tweet, I believe this firmly, and I think that healthy women who are in touch with their femininity, they don't like equal relationships. They want a man to lead. They want a man to be strong. I don't think they want to be in most of them anyway. They don't want to be in a domineering, control freak relationship. It doesn't need to be 50 Shades of Grey up in here with whips and butt plugs and whatever else. Yeah. I mean, if you like that, I mean, do your thing. But yeah, women, they want a relationship where a man is leading and he's dominant and he's confident in his ability to lead the relationship and to lead her and to guide her. And it's very normal and natural for women to want to pursue that, and they feel really good, I think, and in my experience and from my friends I've talked to.
Well, what about your idea, your metaphor of the driver? I mean, you're driving along a trip. You change drivers. I mean, there's no reason why both women and men can't lead at different times or in different ways in a relationship and in a family. Can you comment on that?
Can you give me a specific context where a woman would want to lead something in a family? I mean, I think women, for example, sure.
Okay, sure. She might lead the kids in getting ready for bed, or she might lead the family in choosing what kind of vacation they make, or even choice of house to live in. You know, there's all kinds of different moments and issues that come up in a relationship and marriage and she might lead when the man's just too tired. You know, don't bother me now. You know, I don't want to deal with that. Then that issue is going to have to be dealt with by some form of leadership.
I'm speaking of it more from a fundamental perspective, and I don't see a big problem right off the bat with what you're saying. That in a specific context, like interacting with young children and things like that, women I've read are a lot better at understanding young kids, especially before they can talk. At, for example, navigating what different cries mean and things like that, things that to men just don't make sense. We're not able to navigate it as well. But so for me, it's like who is the leader in the home at the end of the day? Who is the leader in the relationship at the end of the day? Who has the final say on things? And so if push comes to shove, it needs to be the man's decision, the man's leadership. But I don't see a problem in the short term in delegating something like that. I think that to me that would be a very rational thing to do to lead your family.
If you read a book by Esther Viller might say that women have manipulated men into that role, and it was women's decision that men believe that they are leading the family. Maybe they aren't exactly leading the family.
Yeah, she wrote the Manipulated
Man.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun book.
Yeah. It's quite interesting.
It's a good debate, but I'm just speaking from a generalized fundamental perspective on it, and without getting into these very fun debates like that. That is a fun book for sure.
Okay. I think that's all the comments we need to, your tweets that we need to go to, but let's get to some of the comments in the, whoops, what did I get here? Smash the open. We already did that, right? Let me get us out of this mode here. Janice, go ahead and ask Anthony a question while I look up these questions that I...
Oh, Anthony. Okay. I'm running out of questions. Is there anything more that you'd like to say about
Well, you asked me one, Janice, over text earlier today, and it was about brainwashing and how.
Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you? I mean, a lot of young guys, I think, have been browbeaten. I think is maybe a not unfair characterization. I mean, a lot of guys that feel if they dissent in any way from feminist orthodoxy, if they speak out of turn, that they're going to be exiled from the human community, certainly exiled from the community of women, and they have sort of taken on the guilt of being male, the notion that it's women's turn now, all that stuff. You mentioned this on the Piers Morgan show. The future is female. Men should lean in, or men should lean out, or they should just, vote for female candidates, feminist candidates. They should step down from positions of power, give them over to women, all that kind of stuff. And I do meet a number of men who are quite sincere in saying they think society will be better off when women have more power and occupy more positions of power. Now, did you ever feel that, or how did you get the strength and the conviction to dissent from that?
Yeah. So I was never at a point in my life where I was a feminist. Even in my teens, I was more indifferent to it. Kind of like politics. I just wasn't interested in politics until probably 2009, 2010. It just wasn't a thing for me that I was interested in. And feminism was kind of the same way. And had you asked me about it, I wouldn't have really had an opinion on it either way. As far as strength and conviction, it's just always let me put it this way. I could call it weaponized autism. So I don't think I'm actually autistic, but I've seen Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, talk about this in public speeches on entrepreneurship and things like that. And he talks about it today that a lot of Silicon Valley, these tech entrepreneurs and stuff that become millionaires, a lot of them seem to have autism or have developed it on purpose. And he's been trying to navigate whether that's the market attracting that, or whether actually entrepreneurs are developing these behavioral traits on purpose to have the resilience and the strength and conviction to pursue radical ideas that they'll be heavily criticized and things like that. So I have had to develop that, maybe not in childhood. Well, I don't know about childhood so much. I haven't thought about that. But as a young entrepreneur, I know that I had to develop that pretty quickly. I know that right off the bat, I had a lot of enthusiasm for my first convention, but still some pushback. There was some fighting going on even at the very beginning, people trying to take over it, control it and stuff. And so as every year that's gone by in my life as an entrepreneur, I've had to develop more and more thick skin and resilience to the kind of public backlash you'll get, even if it's within a smaller community or a larger community or even the whole world now. So yeah, it's been an incremental thing I've developed over time. But I think it's also always been very natural to me when I was young. My grandma, who I love very, very much, my maternal grandma, would say I was very stubborn, had a thick head. But she would say it with a smile. It was a very positive thing. And I think she saw the toxic masculinity in me kind of bubbling. And where she came from in Croatia, she was born and raised in Croatia, in Susak, a long time ago. And I think she saw it as a very positive thing. She probably wouldn't be able to articulate it like that back in the day. But it felt like I was doing something very positive, and she was nurturing that in me.
You
And
had
in
a
school,
Croatian grandmother.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. My background on my father's side is Croatian.
nice.
Huh,
Yeah.
no wonder. No wonder
Yeah.
I like you.
My grandma, she actually escaped, communism in Yugoslavia back then twice. The first time she got captured, and they could have killed her and my uncle, but they didn't. And she finally escaped to Italy, and she was there like for a year in a concentration camp. And then eventually she came to New York, and there's this huge deal in the New York Times and stuff. She had escaped all that. But yeah,
Okay,
it's
let's.
something that's
I'm
been
sorry.
around.
That's neat. Hey,
Let's get to
speaking
a couple of
speaking of submissive wives, I've got to get going.
Okay.
I promised my husband that we'd get to some of the stuff he wanted to do this afternoon. So
Good.
I'm gonna have to duck out, but this has been great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Anthony, for talking to us and clearing up some misconceptions about your great conference. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been awesome getting to know you, and I appreciate your time.
We'll
Janice,
keep in touch.
before you do jump out, let me just pop this little comment up by Julian, who donated us $10 here. Thank you very much, Julian. You're a hero, Janice. You're a hero. You're one who has helped me considerably. Thank you for standing by men in our time of need. We are stronger together and must cherish one another. God bless you.
Absolutely
Lovely
agree.
comment.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you.
And thank you for
It's
your
my
generous
pleasure
donation.
too.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye
Okay.
to Janice.
Okay. Yeah.
See you, Janice.
Yeah. God bless.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Janice.
Talk to you soon.
You bet. And Anthony, why don't we respond to a couple of questions if you got a few more minutes?
Yep.
Okay, and let me pull up one right here.
Audio still going good, by the way?
Yeah, audio's been steady. I mean, it could stand to be a little bit louder, which you might be able to adjust in the StreamYard, but it's perfectly understandable and hearable and clear since we made that change. Okay, question for Anthony. Since some men's rights activists disagree with your arguments and tactics, would you consider yourself an MRA in spite of that?
Interesting. I mean, on a regular basis, I'll say that I usually don't identify as an MRA, the same way I don't identify as a pickup artist or anything like that. I used to a long time ago when I was very young. I had an old license tag, even license plate that had that in it. But I could say that I'm definitely not opposed to the men's rights activist community. I do have some disagreements with them, as they would with me, for sure. But I do say that the men's rights activists, their whole community, is part of the larger manosphere, and of that, I'm very supportive of that. And I love what they're doing, especially in that I view the men's rights community fundamentally as advocating for individual rights on behalf of men, boys, and fathers. And to that, I support it 1,000,000%. And if that is to be taken as the definition of a men's rights activist, then I definitely am a men's rights activist. But first and foremost, I would see myself as an advocate of individual rights on behalf of everyone. And that to me is very, very important fundamentally.
Cool. Okay, let me get you another comment up here, and you can just speak to this. Any man who engages in marriage in 2020 is an absolute fool. It's not about whether or not the woman will screw him over. It's about that she can. Any comments on that?
I do. So yeah, first of all, it is a problem, even in the best case scenario, in the case of you're an amazing dude, you've got your shit figured out inside, you happen to find or, whatever, marry this amazing woman. Even if things work out perfectly the rest of your lives together, it's not healthy for your relationship that she has so much power in the relationship to destroy it. Like Janice has talked about, like a loaded gun. So like the comment was saying too, that she can. That's not healthy, and your relationship would be better if you were treated equally as a man before the law as she would, in the case of, say, a domestic violence issue or any kind of divorce issue or things like that, which men are not treated fairly before that stuff.
I 100% agree on that, and I've mentioned that too in different videos myself.
As far as the marriage, though, I'm fiercely opposed to legal marriage today in the West.
Opposed to what?
Legally recognized marriage.
Okay.
So I was married years ago, so to speak, but I did not get a marriage certificate in the state of Florida or the state of Nevada. So this is something that I concocted because of my experiences in the manosphere, seeing the men's rights activists talk about how unfair marriage was for men, and even men in the pickup artist community that would come there after a really nasty divorce, trying to get back in the dating market and understand, the modern dating marketplace. I just seen horror story after horror story. So my experience with that marriage and what I'll do in the future is we had a wedding, we had vows, we had family come out, we had an officiator, so to speak, rings, we had a honeymoon in Hawaii. She even took my last name legally. Went to the courthouse in Florida, went through this whole process, had a new passport, new driver's license, and all that. So we had all the functions of a marriage minus the government getting involved. So I am firmly opposed to any man today, unless and until things dramatically change, to getting a legally recognized marriage, including common law marriage, if you can avoid it. I know in Canada that's a lot harder.
Yeah, I don't think you can avoid it in Canada. And even in the U.S., are you not considered common law after a period of time living together?
In most states, you are not.
Is that right?
That's right. I think it actually has been getting better, believe it or not, over time, which is strange. Like in Florida, we had common law marriage, I think, till 1986, and then they got rid of it. Now they'll recognize it from a state that does have it, like Texas. Texas, for example, still has it under certain conditions. I think one of them is, you live together for a certain period of time. Another one, though, is you have to officially announce that you're married in some way, like a newspaper. And if you don't meet these conditions, then you're not common law married. In Florida, though, in Nevada, where I got married, there is no common law marriage that they'll actually that will exist if you do anything. Even if you announce you're married, they won't recognize it like I did. So yeah, fortunately, most U.S. states don't have common law marriage. And if you are going to do what I did, a private marriage, speak with an attorney first in your state. But most states don't have common law marriage, and it's a good way to evade the whole disaster of divorce or a divorce court and things like that. So my divorce, so to speak, I lost nothing, which is pretty good for a man today.
Yeah, excellent. Let's get another comment up here. How do you prevent a woman who understands the red pill and how feminism is destroying relationships, but her parents are liberal and just don't get it? I'm not sure what the question is here. How do you prevent a woman? I should have read that before popping it up because I'm not really. If Carl, if you can explain a little more detail, what is the question here?
Yeah, it's kind of like a half-finished thought.
Yeah, it's kind of half-finished thought, yeah. So, Carl, we'll be happy to look your question up if you can put it in the form of a question. Let's see if we get another comment on here. There was another one here. You can just comment on that, on this statement. Toxic stoic. These kinds of men will bring everybody else down. Oh, crap. I didn't really read that properly either, so it doesn't. It's part of a conversation they were having, so it doesn't fit. I don't understand the context, so we'll have to forego that.
I think they're talking about us, but screw them. So
Toxic Stoic is one of the guys, one of the viewers' screen name there. Yeah. So not sure what they were talking about. So Black Knight Fool says, so don't get married. Can't argue with that. The state of marriage today, it's a one-sided bad deal for men.
Yep.
So if we don't have any more questions, then Anthony, do you have anything else you want to leave us with here tonight?
I just want to say I appreciate the depth of the questions you've asked. They're a lot better than what I got on Piers Morgan, and it really is gonna have me think about these issues. Especially if it comes up in even larger interviews in the future, I'll have to have zingers in response, just to kind of iron things out. The difference between traditionalism and a more positive future for women, make women great again, things like that. So I enjoy the questions I'm getting with you here. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharp as steel.
Steel sharpens steel, is what I like to say.
Steel sharpens steel.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I wish you all the best with the conference organization and success there.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good time.
Awesome. And thank you, viewers, for joining us, and look for us again next week with Janice Fiamengo. And if you're up during the day and you want to join me for a coffee break with Steve on Studio Brule, where I just go over quickly some of the things that come across my desk over the past, since the last coffee break, and it's a very informal conversation. So have a good night, and thanks again for joining us.